You mentioned the corporate media a minute ago. Does it bother you that generally it's a generalization, but that the corporate media tends not to cover all candidates, whether it's in this race or others, equally?
Of course it bothers me. It absolutely bothers me because they have this outlet, this vehicle to inform people. But when you're not including those other people that are running for the same office, you are now excluding people and you're not allowing democracy to be practiced. And so that in itself gets in the way of an actual democracy from happening in this country.
Sema Hernandez is surging. She's surging, you guys, and a lot of the media still doesn't want to talk about her. Thank God the Houston Chronicle is decent enough to feature her in an article. It's very, very fair to do that. She's running for Senate in Texas. She's a front runner in this race. Even though polls want to omit her, where is she? She was definitely running. She had announced her candidacy, one of the first. Someone else, almost 20% of the vote. Someone else over the leading candidate. I wonder what most of those people, I wonder who they might be looking for. I wonder. There's this piece of shit article that somebody wrote. Gromer Jeffers Jr., total tool, this guy. This whole article goes through talking about the race for the Senate against John Cornyn. Terrible, awful, one of the worst senators in the country, John Cornyn. And this guy doesn't mention Semih Hernandez. I don't think once in this whole freaking article, dude. It's crazy. We go through and he lists candidates after he goes through a bunch of this nonsense, and then he cites these polls. Both of the polls he cites, right, are just like this poll. This is one of the polls he cited. The other one also omits Sema Hernandez for some reason. Inexplicable, frankly. It shouldn't be allowed, if you ask me. I don't think that's fair at all. How are you going to just omit people from the poll, people who are definitely running, people who are serious candidates, who have a grassroots movement? But it definitely has to do with the fact that she... I mean, let's face it, the fossil fuel industry owns the state. Most of the politicians, they basically run the whole fucking thing. And maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe they just don't take her very seriously at all. Just because she's a complete outsider. It could just be that bias. But it's inexcusable in any case that you can come up with. Inexcusable. 6.5% wanted someone else in the race. I wonder who they could be talking about. You seriously can't just omit people from the polls. It is to completely black out her campaign because they don't want her to gain any traction. They really don't. They're against everything that she stands for because she challenges the establishment. She challenges the fossil fuel industry. And she would from day one. She said from day one she would declare the climate emergency.
When it comes down to the bottom line, first day in office if elected, what would you do?
Immediately declare the climate crisis emergency and address the issues of militarization and American imperialism and the war, ending the war economy.
The climate crisis is an emergency, and it's one that's going to kill us all if we don't do something. They're running through quotations. They're quoting every candidate on there, just introducing the candidate and their pedigree, their resume or whatever. And it looks like they go through every one except for Sema Hernandez. And, look at this, you guys. I did find one spot in this article where they mention her, and it's cited in the photo. Oh. Her name is right there. At least you know she's in the photograph. Who is she? I don't know. But, yeah, she's not a serious candidate. Look at this. 4 of the top 5 candidates got into the race late by today's standards. And some of them still haven't built out their field and fundraising operations. This is absurd. Absurd. Top 5 candidates that are polling at what? Who are these top 5 candidates? Chris Bell, Amanda Edwards, MJ Hegar, which we know is the establishment favorite, Christina Ramirez, and Royce West. All right, so what are these fools polling at here? 8%, 8%, 7% in this poll. 8%, 6%, 5%. It's it's a wide open race. There's no serious candidates here by any metric that you could possibly point to. When they say serious, it's just a euphemism for establishmentarian. That's all it means. These guys are status quo politicians who play the game and take the money and are not going to save us. We need to save ourselves. And the only person fighting for us is Sema Hernandez.
Look, let's just start with what's your story? Like, just to people who don't know who you are, who are you? Why are you running?
Well, it is a long story. For some people think 34 years is too short. But in fact, in 34 years, I've experienced more oppression than I can think of anyone in their 70s has ever actually experienced. So from a little girl, I remember my grandparents working in the tomato fields in Florida, in Waimama, Florida, and picking tomatoes with my grandmother as a plane would fly over us and dump toxic chemicals on top of us. So from a very young age, we've experienced that. And being a daughter of immigrants, a daughter of migrant workers, has really shaped the way I see the world. And for such a long time, I've accepted that this is normal for me, and this is normal for a lot of us. And when it came time for elections, it would just be the same type of people coming up and saying that they're going to do something for us. But once they were in office, they never fulfilled that. And I wanted to run for office to ensure that those promises are being kept and that those promises that I make are going to be kept. So coming from a very humble beginning and still being in that bracket where I'm still oppressed and I'm still silenced and facing adversity, it's one of the reasons why I continue to run. So anywhere from the migrant to work field to seeing ICE raids in the work field to experiencing the inequalities in healthcare, that's basically where my background is in humanitarian issues and human rights issues.
Why are you running as a candidate this time? I have experienced firsthand the plight of the working class, migrant worker, immigrant family, person of color to understand and have viable solutions for a better way of life. I'm running at this time to be a voice for future generations, to represent the everyday persons in Texas and America who are struggling to make ends meet despite working multiple jobs for very little pay. My top concern is healthcare, universal healthcare. Semih Hernandez is the only candidate that has prioritized the climate crisis and addressing the climate crisis by opposing the fossil fuel industry and fighting for Medicare for All, Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, specifically. No workarounds, no public option, half measures, anything like that. It's Medicare for everybody, full stop. Look at the latest UN climate report. It's not looking good. And we are at the epicenter of the petrochemical complex, the energy complex down here in East Houston. It's here. She's fighting because she is coming from this community and she knows what they're able to get away with The state of Texas does not fund environmental regulators. It does not give adequate funding for testing water and air quality at regular periods for regular durations. It's just not funded. And that's because the industry owns the whole state. They've bought the politicians. They regulate themselves. And so whatever goes out in the water and in the air, we've seen in various disasters throughout the years, especially in recent years as they are aggressively transforming their infrastructure to do more plastic productions. They are just blowing up right and left, leaking in their pipelines. It's done rushed, it's done on the cheap, and it's done without a consideration for our environment, our health. This is a war on the environment that the GOP has been waging for years, and Sema Hernandez is the only Democrat that's going to actually oppose it. Sema says her ex-husband, who worked as a contractor for many gas and oil outfits in the Houston area, told her of the shortcuts the companies take, and through him she's seen the jobs in the industry disappear just as fast as they came. That's the one thing about fossil fuel jobs. They're not permanent. They are temporary jobs. And in fact, all our jobs these days are very temporary. And that's another reason why Medicare for all is absolutely worth fighting for and necessary for everybody. You can't change a system, a corrupt system, by taking its money. That's what Bernie Sanders believes, and that's what Semih Hernandez believes. If you're willing to take on John Cornyn, then you will have to be willing to take on his donors. We are not afraid of this industry.
Tell me what's now. You have an opponent in the primary, Democratic primary.
I do have several opponents, but one of them that the Democratic Party considers a status quo opponent is one that lost her congressional district here in the state of Texas, and she, like many other candidates who have a military background, are ones who continue to run on that military background, which is more intervention, more oil, and no platform, just platitudes. So that's that. Her name is MJ Hegar. And that's one who I know the media is getting behind because they're already pushing her as of 2 days ago. So my challenge is, again, to break through that narrative and continue to campaign on the progressive message that is unapologetically human, and show the diversity of our campaign, our volunteers, our message, our platform, our intersectionality, and get to the debate stage and actually have a debate that was denied to us the first time around.
Former Air Force pilot MJ Hegar, another Democrat vying to challenge Cornyn, says she has likewise sworn off such donations, though she hasn't signed that specific pledge, which, like the Green New Deal, has become something of a marker of where candidates stand on issues of energy and climate change. Semih Hernandez is our only hope. She needs the votes. She needs you guys to vote for her in the primary. You got to go to semafortexas.com and donate money to her because she doesn't take any money from corporate PACs or fossil fuel executives or any big money donations. She's strictly grassroots funded, and she's running in Texas. It's one of the largest states in the country. And this is it. Right? It's time to quit fucking around because this is our survival at stake. We cannot survive another 4 years of Trump. We can't survive another term of John Cornyn or any of these corrupt Republicans. This is their defense of John Cornyn here, of the fossil fuel industry. To say you're just going to eradicate fossil fuels and roll over the gas and oil industry is not realistic, and it would devastate our economy. Let's work together to address the problem. This disingenuous appeal to bipartisanship has accelerated us down this road. It hasn't addressed any problems, and that's why so many emergencies are what we're facing. Maloney, reading more, said much of the oil and gas industry has awakened to the fact that it needs to begin transitioning towards clean energy. He pointed to the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which includes many of the biggest oil companies, including ExxonMobil, Chevron, yada, 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 and claims to have invested more than $1 billion in technologies to cut carbon emissions. $1 billion is not even, it's a drop in the bucket. To put that in perspective, ExxonMobil, any given quarter, makes over $1 billion in profit. Right? Any given quarter since the Trump tax cuts, they've been making record profits. Over $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 billion each quarter. They're making billions and billions every year, especially since the Trump tax cuts. And Trump has also cut regulations on the environment and increased carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are not being cut, no matter how much or how little they invest in technology that they say will cut carbon emissions. They are still actively contributing to our suffering, right? This is not a black and white binary climate crisis or not, tipping point or we're okay. This is a matter of intensity. The longer that we let this continue, the worse the problem is going to be for all of us. The hotter things are going to get, and at a certain point, you get to the hothouse Earth scenario where feedback loops feedback to a point where we can't reverse the process. And after a few degrees beyond where we're at now, a Celsius of warming, we're looking at likely extinction. And that's where we're headed. On the trajectory that we are on right now, that is where we are headed. And the only one looking to reverse this madness, is Sema Hernandez, the only serious candidate. Forget the other 4 or 5 serious top candidates. They're not serious. Anybody who's talking about anything less than eliminating emissions, which even if we do overnight, we're still looking at around 1 degrees warming of Celsius left to go. There's no slowing this down unless we stop now. Now. SemaForTexas.com. Donate, support her, however you can. If you have social media, talk about her, especially if you're in Texas. Spread the word. This is a grassroots campaign. Go to her issues page. See what she's about. It's the real deal. We've only got one shot. And we know that the Democrats, the Democratic Party, is not interested in opposing the fossil fuel industry. It's not just any blue will do. You can't just support any Democrat because they're not being serious about this. They are not opposing the
fossil fuel industry.
The frontrunner, the Democrat recruited by and endorsed by Chuck Schumer, right? A New York Democrat. What does he know about Texas and Texas needs? He only cares about the fundraising. He only cares about the money, getting the money to the party, having the party's needs represented in Texas. That's all Chuck Schumer cares about, okay? So MJ Hegar ran for Congress in 2018, lost because she doesn't stand for anything, has no issues, is only representing herself. She's a veteran, an Air Force pilot. She's a representative of the national security state and the fossil fuel industry. She wants to keep the war machine going. More wars, more fossil fuel expenditures. Just keep the status quo in a blue suit, not a red one. That will not be acceptable. We will die. And just to try to help paint a picture of just how desperate it is for a Democrat to win this state if you don't have grassroots support like Sema Hernandez does. And this UT poll, University of Texas, Texas Tribune poll, less than a quarter of the people that were polled knew who any of these fuckers were. Knew anybody in this race. Sema Hernandez with $4,000 for her campaign in 2018, and she still got nearly a quarter of the vote in the primary. And now she's running again. And she's taken that grassroots campaign that she built and straight out of the gate after 2018, launching it. And now with 13% of these responders knowing who she is, she polls at 3%. A statistical tie for third place. I mean, look at this. Most people still are undecided about this. And we are getting closer. This is starting to really matter. You got to be registered by February to vote, because you need to register 30 days in advance. The primary Super Tuesday is in March, so you got to be registered.
And this position that I'm running for is very historic because it's the first time a Latina woman is going to run and possibly win to bring change for our communities after so many years of women just being oppressed in general. It's breaking the patriarchal system that has driven this country to marginalize women and women of color. I'm a Latina. My mother and my father came to this country in the 80s. I was born in Houston. I'm a first-generation American-born in this country. My mother and my grandparents were migrant workers working in the fields in Florida, picking oranges and tomatoes and watermelons. I know the struggle of immigrants and I know the struggle of migrant workers every day. Just us being a certain ethnicity, being Mexican, is a challenge. Our language barriers are a challenge as well. My first language is Spanish. My second language is English, and both of the languages I do dominate very well. I'm a Latina and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of my culture. And knowing the history and how far we've come in this country is a really big deal.